Welcome to Peloton's Move for Life podcast. In this podcast, we peel back the layers of our in-class programming and we talk about the science behind fitness. In each episode, you're going to get direct takeaways from wellness experts in the health and wellness space. How much of a role do genes play?
I think a lot of people thought that so much of your life is dictated by genetics. It's really about 25%. How quickly you can recover from a workout actually can tell you a lot about how healthy you are.
Why should people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s start thinking about longevity?
Truly just initiating some sort of exercise or resistance routine that can literally reduce their mortality, but also increase their functionality.
We're going to learn more about living longer, healthier, and happier lives together. Hi, everyone. Matt Wilpers here, and I'm so excited for our conversation today. As a Peloton instructor, I love nothing more than talking about the science behind fitness. And today we're going to talk about how fitness impacts longevity. And as a new dad, this is a super important subject to me because I not only want to be around as my kid gets older, but I also want to play an active role in his life and demonstrate what a healthy lifestyle looks like. All right, so first I want to give a big welcome to our guest today. She's a physician, medical contributor for NBC News, and a part of our wellness advisory board at Peloton, who also happens to be a good friend of mine. Please welcome Dr. Kavita Patel.
Great to be with you, Matt. Thanks for having me.
So Dr. Patel, for those who might not know you, please tell us a little bit about your background and why is longevity such a passion of yours?
Yeah, so I'm trained as an internal medicine doctor, and that means essentially that I'm a doctor for adults, but I train in everything. And over the years of practice, I've seen so many cases where we could have prevented someone from a fall, or we could have helped somebody by just getting them started with walking for even 5 minutes a day, and that could make a difference. And I see this over years and years. I can't tell you how many people at the ages of 60, 70, 80 start to do some of these exercises, and they see changes. They're able to walk stairs, lift groceries, things that matter to them. And I think that's part of why I've been so passionate, not just about the research behind it, but how do we get that research actually into people's hands so they can do something with it? I don't want to just see it in a journal, in a scientific print. I want this to become alive. And I think that's what inspired you and I to kind of join forces on this.
No, I love this because as a coach, this is what I've been seeing throughout my entire coaching career.
Yeah.
And now this is the science that speaks to what's actually happening.
Right.
So it's like we're bringing these two worlds together. And I hope people and our community learns a lot from this and has a lot of fun with this.
And the science has advanced so much. Just even in the last 5 years, we're learning more and more, just like we just talked about walking. That can matter. Heart rate. We're going to get into all these fun topics today.
It's an exciting time to be, I'm sure, to be a physician, but also to be a coach because things are changing so quickly. And all the things we've seen for years, the studies are now supporting it.
Absolutely.
Okay, now let's start off with the basics. What is longevity and why is it so important?
Yeah, so longevity really is thinking about kind of how your life or your biological clock, which is kind of what we talk about with our years, how that matches up to your health span or how healthy you are and how active and functional you are. And so people sometimes get confused. Longevity feels like something for old people, or maybe it's for once you get a certain age. That's wrong. It's an important topic for anybody at any age. Even as you know, with a newborn, you can never start too early to think about the kind of life you want to live. So sometimes people talk about longevity as think about the last 10 to 20 years of your life. But I like to say, think about every year and kind of what you want to do to be the healthiest you can be in that moment. And that's almost like putting money into a bank account so that you can use it all the time today and even years from now.
It reminds me of a quote from my coach from high school. And he was just like, told everyone at the end of their senior year, he goes, I don't just want to see you running now. I want to see you running when you're 60, 70 years old. I want to bump into you when you're out there running. And I'm like, that is stuck in my head ever since then. I'm like, okay, so whatever I'm doing, I'm not sacrificing the ability to do that later in my life.
Yeah.
I'm preparing for that.
And you forgive yourself. So I've seen a lot of even just people who start a routine or start something and then they life happens. They stop. Happens to me. Yeah. Then they stop and they get frustrated. But I think we're talking about having that longevity kind of be part of how you think about today is the first day I can start on helping the rest of my life be better. And that just gives you a different mindset.
I love that. So one thing that comes to mind is genes. People often say good genes run in my family and I'm doomed because of my family history. And this is definitely a conversation I've had with my wife as, having a baby. It's like, okay, what are our genes saying? We actually looked into this free baby. Is that accurate? How much of a role do genes play?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, including myself,
Longevity.
when I was in medical school, thought that so much of your life is dictated by genetics. But we now know from an accumulation of studies that it's really about 25% of your health. That's a significant amount, but it's not as much as people think.
Doesn't yeah, no.
No. So that means that about 75% is in your control. Now, some of it might not be in your control, like the environment or the air you're breathing, but a lot of it is in your control. And that should give you a sense of you're not doomed by how or where or when you were born, but really about what happens from your birth, as you said, to model for yourself and for the people around you.
And one thing I learned in school was that just because you have a gene doesn't mean it'll be expressed.
Yes, that's exactly right. And with science, we're actually seeing advances where even with an expression of a gene, Matt, that's probably another episode, but you can actually manipulate that expression. It's incredible. What's happening with genes is so fluid. But again, it should just reinforce that often when people think, my body or I'm the way I am, my health is the way it is because of genetics, that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I think that's an important point for everyone to really take home is there's some genes that we have that we can think about getting in front of and being proactive with, but 75% of your longevity is in your control.
Right. And that means that it's not something that I find that also hard sometimes because people feel like they failed.
Yeah.
Not at all. It's just, again, today is the first day of like your path to longevity. And you just think about it that way. It's a reset. You don't need to kind of feel like your past dictates your future necessarily.
Yeah, I always think about that in terms of every day, next
Yeah.
day is a new day to, reset.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's never too late.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about numbers. I love numbers. You love numbers.
Yes, we do. We do. We love numbers.
So I was really excited for this part of the conversation. What should people be tracking to optimize their longevity? I see people like, I've got trackers, you got trackers.
Yeah, we do. You and I are believers in like data.
I love
think.
the data.
Yeah, I do. And I think the data is important. So we're referring to like some of our wearables, but we know that when we're riding a bike or on a treadmill or in a row, we can see also things that are very important. So I'm going to call out, there are a lot of different markers for longevity. So we're going to hear a lot about kind of, you can add more to this, but I want to try to get some basics that cover like kind of 4 big areas. And that just gives you a sense of what are the things you might want to just try to identify in advance. So heart rate or heart rate variability. So when we talk about measuring heart rate, we know from studies that depending on how like either long it takes to get to a certain heart rate or how quickly you can recover from a workout actually can tell you a lot about how healthy you are. So meaning, for example, that when you do your power zone classes or I do your power zone classes and I can see how my heart rate changes, that if I can improve that variability and change it, that'll directly translate in studies we've done in hundreds of thousands of people to all-cause mortality, meaning that the more I can actually control my heart rate variability, being able to know when to elevate it and how to recover appropriately, that can translate to literally saving my life, reducing all-cause mortality. We're going to link to the scientific articles in our show notes so that people who are interested in learning more can see all the numbers, how it broke down by different ages. But it's what you do in your power zone training. You try to teach people to look at their heart rate. That's one component. The second one really is around your kind of overall cholesterol, and I'll just call it, good cholesterol and bad cholesterol are both important in your body. And there's different markers. We talk about HDL, LDL. I like to use as a back of reference, the HDL is high density. You want that number to be as high as possible because it's a protective cholesterol. LDL, you want that number to be as low as possible because that can indicate cardiac risk if it's too high. The third is around your sugars.
Oh gosh.
Hemoglobin A1C, we've talked about it. That's confusing to a lot of people because some people can actually check their sugars and may have had their finger pricked and they get their glucose checked. The hemoglobin A1C is actually it's a blood test. Okay. It's a better monitor of how your sugar's been handled in your body over the last several months. That can tell us a lot from whether you're a diabetic to how you handle after you kind of eat a certain type of food, how you might handle that food over time. And then finally, the key piece that you and I know you're going to nerd out on, VO2 max. that's an area we can talk about how hard or easy it is to measure. It's something we do in a lab setting. But V refers to volume, O2 refers to oxygen. This just tells you how your body uses oxygen and how efficient you are. And here's something that might surprise people, not you, is that the more efficient you are, the lower your risk of everything from heart disease to even neurodegenerative disorders. So we love to talk about these numbers and get people to understand their own numbers and how they can improve them.
Yeah, a couple of these stick out to me. Well, the first one, heart rate variability. Part of exercise is recovery.
Right.
And if your recovery is not high quality,
Yeah.
then you're not going to be prepared for your next bout of
Whatever.
exercise.
Mhm.
And so one thing that we've learned from HRV is starting to quantify how are you recovering. And if I was a coach, like coaching a team, I would have everyone I would have HRV on all my athletes, because it's just like I would see, okay, I know how they're doing in training sessions, but how are they doing outside of training sessions?
Right.
How are they recovering? Because
Right.
recovery is where you absorb the training.
Right.
And if you're not absorbing the training, then we have no platform. We can't build the next training session.
Right.
You got to keep recovering. So what we're seeing, with alcohol specifically, is that it really inhibits the recovery process.
Yeah, so it slows it down.
Slows it all down.
Right. Do you have a sense of what's optimal from a recovery period, or is it
It changes.
It does.
It's different based on your age.
Right. Maybe I know
Like a lot of different things.
I've seen studies that even show by gender. So
by gender, et
we
cetera.
know that there's age, gender, which gets back to, I think that if I were trying to figure out what do I do with what my heart rate, what I tell people is just know what your baseline is. I think you're exactly right. It's not just your heart rate during training. I love the fact that because I can check my heart rate in different ways, I can do it at times of stress, when I'm relaxed, and it just gives you more data on how you recover. And also how you kind of get into literally like the zone for certain kinds of training. And that training may just be outdoor walking. So we'll talk about how walking is activity, but that heart rate tells you so much with such an easy way to measure, from doing it old school on your wrist or on your neck, that's your carotid, to some of the wearables we've talked about.
Absolutely. And again, the faster you recover, the faster you can get back to training. The more training load you can put on your body, and this all comes back to your rate of adaptation.
Right.
So the faster that you're adapting to the training, the more training load you can take on, which means your peak level of fitness you can obtain within a certain amount of time is much greater than someone else that's not able to adapt as quick.
And that translates on the health side and the science that we said behind it. That translates to study after study that shows that exactly that pattern you described also translates to literally reducing all-cause mortality. So not just from cardiac disease, but we're talking like everything from cardiometabolic diseases, neurodegenerative diseases. It's incredible what that one little data point can tell you about your health.
See, this is why I preach this. You know this from classes, is I talk about like using performance as a leading indicator for health can be sometimes beneficial. And thinking about, well, if we're performing better, which is exciting and fun, we're likely getting healthier along the way. Yeah. And the other number that I hold true to my heart here is the LDL cholesterol, which is my own genetic struggles. Yeah. And the complexity behind LDL has been something I've been learning about lately. And
I'll touch on that because I know that there's so much more. We can't get into everything, so we'll do what we can in show notes and try to get to it. And
yes, check out the show notes, y'all.
But I want to emphasize, like, we're calling out LDL, as you appropriately pointed out, because that's a good example where there is a very small percentage of people that have a genetic predisposition to really high LDLs, which can put them in incredible risk for heart disease. But the majority of us fall into kind of I'll call it a bell curve, where some of us are low, some of us are under, like in the middle, average, and then some are really high. And people always ask me, well, what am I aiming for? And we used to say, lower is better, LDL, you want it as low as possible. What we're finding in some studies is actually that maybe you don't want to go as low as possible, but you want to try to emphasize that if you're at a higher risk, you want to probably talk to your doctor about whether you need any medication to go lower if it's high. And then at a certain LDL, we also now know there are additional cholesterol markers that might be helpful, and that's something called apolipoprotein or ApoB. You'll hear about this in some of the longevity literature, but I want to say that it's just an example, the LDL that is, of a blood measure that's simple to get at a doctor's office that can start to give you a window into how your health is.
Interesting. Interesting. Quick side question on that.
Yeah.
So the end result of a elevated LDL level,
Yeah.
is that calcification?
So it's a great question. So
Okay.
the reason we focus on cholesterol and we talk about good and bad is that is it's not the only factor, but it's a real major driver in plaque in our pipes or in our arteries, and to your point, calcifications. And you'll hear, I'm glad you brought up the word calcium. This
Okay.
leads to a kind of a side note of when we find someone with a higher cardiac risk, we can do other things like a calcium coronary or a heart calcium score for the very reason you're pointing out, that things like high cholesterol can lead to plaque, which can lead to literally calcium deposits. And you can measure this. Technology is amazing. You can actually measure this in the blood. And we also have like scans and things we can do. Again, I use that LDL number a little bit, Matt, just as a front door. It just
Gotcha.
tells us a little bit about where you are in an important way, but it's not everything. And we can do other things depending on that result.
Yeah, I recently did the calcification score just to see.
Yeah. I have too.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
fascinating. It was just to see like how far along, like how it gives you an idea of how serious and how aggressive you need to be
Yeah.
with numbers like your
It's
LDL.
data. I think it's everybody's right to have that data. And something patients ask me, it's hard when you're in a doctor's office. Usually they're rushed and there's something else that you're there for. But I always encourage people, just say like, hey, is there anything else I should be checking that's come out that might help me? Because some people, like me as a doctor, sometimes we're just so in the zone of like what you're here for. And we kind of need to step back and say, yeah, Matt, actually, let's talk about your family history. You have a higher history of heart disease. Maybe we'll add in a calcium score this time because you're pretty healthy. You're Matt Wilpers. But we also know, getting back to that 25%, genetics does play a role. And how can we learn more about that?
And I'd like for the listeners to think about some of the tools we're giving you today are tools to be more proactive.
Yeah, that's right.
And ask these questions of your physician versus just sitting back and taking in the data and say, well, if they're happy, I'm happy. Well, you should also be asking questions, and here are some things here's some tools in your tool belt that you could be asking about.
Yeah, and remember, key part of health is not just your doctor. We'll get into this. This is like a lot of podcast episodes that I'm excited about, but we'll talk about sleep, nutrition, and sometimes different professionals handle different aspects of your health. Absolutely. And so I think a lot of just today we want to cover longevity and some key markers, but there's so many people that play on that team of keeping you healthy.
All right, I could stay on this forever, but let's keep going. So for those listening who think longevity doesn't really matter till later in life, why should people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s start thinking about longevity?
So we know that just think about it as the foundations that we would put down in a house. So you might say all right, the first thing that you do when you're building a new house is you see that concrete going in and it's building that foundation. That's exactly why thinking about it I would even offer your teens. I mean, I talk to my 8 and 10-year-old about, just how to think about movement and why sleep is important. And I always say to my 8-year-old, I said, your brain is like refreshing, just like the computer when you sleep. And it helps your body refresh too. So I think it's never too early, and it's also never too late. But we also do know from literature and studies that have shown that when you do kind of pay attention to some of those key markers and indicators in your 20s, that you can actually literally live longer, but also live a healthier life in the function of what you want. So you just described wanting to be able to play with your son and being able to do things as you age. That's exactly what we find when we study populations that start to kind of, or live in communities like blue zones or communities where they think about health from the beginning. We see that they live longer and they're happier, meaning they're content with what their functionality is, and they're satisfied even at the end of their life. We don't talk enough about the end of our lives. It's a little topic we're scared of. But when you start early, we all see statistically that the last years of your life are the most satisfying.
That's fascinating. One thing that pops in my head is, and I'm going through this now, is skincare. And my mom got me started very early on skincare when I was young.
Sunscreen?
On sunscreen, moisturizer, all this stuff. And then as I've gotten older, I've kept it up with it.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, your skin looks amazing. I'm like, that didn't happen today.
Yeah,
that happened back when my mom was, helping, getting me on top of all this stuff. And so it reminds me of just simply like a skincare routine.
Yeah, you would think when you're young and you're like, I don't need to do this. Come on, mom. My own kids do it to me. I'm like, I don't need sunscreen. Oh, my daughter the other day said, well, it's cloudy outside. I don't need sunscreen. Ah, but you do.
You
So
do.
you do. So I think you're exactly right. Like that's why an early investment, but it's so little. Think about the time to put the skincare together or just what we're talking about with moving more or sleeping. It seems like just those little nudges can have such huge effects over time.
Yeah, and making those routines early,
Right.
gosh, it makes it easier later in life.
It
'Cause
really does.
You don't have to, again, I always say in class, you guys hear me say this all the times, routines are easy to form, hard to break.
I
So
remember. That's
yeah,
a
so your
master.
bad routines are like hard to break.
Yeah.
And so getting it started early, even better. And another thing that sticks in my mind is I was a CPA,
Mhm.
and I always made sure to take care of my health along the way. And I was going through that as in my 30s, and coming out of my 20s into my 30s, I saw it was like all of a sudden, it was like, boom, those who took care of their health and
Yes.
wellness and those that didn't looked
Absolutely.
very different.
Yeah, they do.
And it was like, it happened like 32, 33.
Right.
And I was like, and I stayed on top of my routine, whereas my friends did not.
Yeah.
You look very different.
Yeah, you remind me, there's a friend of mine, a cardiologist, Dr. Eric Topol. He wrote a book called Super Agers. You're what we would describe as a super ager. So somebody who I should be careful about keeping Matt's ego in check.
Ego
Matt.
blowing up right now.
But you're reminding me of like, there are things we see when we look at people in their 80s, 90s, 100. I actually have a patient, 106. I actually take care of her and her daughter and her granddaughter, 60s, 80s, and 106. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? Eating, drinking. And they describe just having like, honestly, we'll get into this in another episode. They describe having a happy life when they started too, where they remember kind of having great friends and eating healthy and moving by taking trips together and going on hikes together, even at a young age. So super aging, when you say, what is longevity? It's how do you want to live at all ages? And it starts young. But I want to emphasize something. It's never too late to start. We'll get into this.
Yeah,
I don't
let's
want
talk
people to
about
feel
that.
doomed that they've got to do something. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So what would people say to people who think that it's too late to start? Like,
Right.
I hear that sometimes.
I
It's
do
like
too. I feel that way.
how many times have I told like people come to me, they're like, I'm like, you should work on running, strength training, whatever. They're like, it's I'm old. It's too late. I'm like,
right. It's too late for me.
It's too late for me.
I felt that way. Sometimes when I try taking new classes, for example, on the row, I was like, I can't do this. I never did rowing before. I can't do this. But here's what I'll tell you the science shows us. This is what kind of go back to the data. We've seen in cohorts of studies of people in their 60s and 70s and who are not necessarily active before, that even doing lightweight, we're talking about walking, we're talking about low intensity exercises, even just resistance or balance exercises, can reduce their mortality and actually improve their function in the double digits. So it depends on what you do. You do have to kind of, as you said, stick with the habit. But looking at population of patients in their 60s and 70s, both men and women, we found that starting, truly just initiating some sort of exercise or resistance routine on a regular basis. What is regular? Usually 2 to 3 times a week, but doing something every week, that can literally reduce their mortality, but also increase their functionality. Because what do people want in their 60s and 70s? They want to be able to kind of move freely, do the things that they've been doing, and not feel like they depend on anyone. There was a cohort that was done in Europe that showed just starting that. And again, these were people who didn't do really much of anything on a regular basis prior to their 60s. It's never too late. And we also have a study of 80 to 90-year-olds who have just started resistance training. And that's especially important for women around just kind of making sure that they have, at any age, but resistance training, bone strength. I'd love for them to start as early as possible, but we know that it's never too late, and that even starting in their 80s can reduce chances of a fracture, a fall. And I think that's exactly, when I think about how I want to age, that's exactly the stuff that's important to me.
And that's something I see at Peloton. After classes, when we have live studio audiences, we have photograph line.
Right.
People come up and take photos, but they also tell you stories about their training. And a lot of times I'll see the same people. Maybe it'll be months before I see them again. Maybe it'll be last week. Sometimes it's years. And y'all, the transformations I've seen in people 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that just got started, they come back, dropped 40 pounds, got stronger. It's like a totally different person.
Yeah. And there's no one thing that's right, but I think that it's amazing to just have, I think you've said it, consistency. You know, we need to just make sure that whatever you do, you make it a habit. And there is no limit to the age in which to start. So anybody who's watching or listening, I encourage them, just even out the door, a couple of minutes a day can make that difference. And the science proves that.
And again, something we always come back to, and we'll talk about this we talk about more about fitness, but frequency, duration, intensity. Remember, intensity is the least important. If you're just getting started, frequency is most important.
Right.
So just having a consistent frequency of working out at low intensity, big bang for your buck.
Right.
You do not need to wake up the next day a sore mess.
That's right.
to get a lot out of your training.
That's right.
All right. So I'm going to go to this top 5 segment here.
I love it.
We're top 5 daily mistakes that shorten lifespan.
But I feel like we need a little music to
I know.
kind of get into the top 5. Like a little,
Da-da-da-da-da.
okay, good. That's good. That's good. All right. So sitting too much and moving too little. That's the top mistake that I see people making. So what everyone asks me, and I think they always ask you, how much do you need to, when you're talking about frequency or duration and certainly intensity. But we know that the American Heart Association, you and I have talked about it, like a goal would be 150 minutes a week. But that can sound really daunting. So I always say, like, anything that can help you just create a habit is a good place to start. But what the science shows us about how much to move is that movement, even at a low intensity of about 75 minutes a week, is incredible. So sometimes you hear about the 11 minutes a day. That kind of gets viral in social media. That's kind of how they broke down. It's really that 75 minutes a week study of lower intensity it's a bit of a sweet spot.
Yeah, and that's why you have to check out the Move for Life program. It's a program over the course of 4 weeks that starts you off much lower than 150.
Right.
And it works you up to 150. And we break it up into small chunks in order to help you develop the habit of exercising every single day.
It's just getting out the door, even around the block. You can do anything. All right. So second.
What's the second one?
Second one, sleep.
Oh, boy.
Sleep, sleep, sleep. I suffer from this. I am a horrible insomniac. So trust me, it's something that I personally have to, I've become dependent on Peloton meditation to actually help put me to sleep. That works for me. But I think everybody probably at some point in their life has some issues with sleep. And the only thing I want to mention about the science of what we know, people always ask me, what's that magic number of hours? So there's a bit of a U curve to the science of sleep. Okay. And we know that there's actually an amount, meaning if you look at the shape of a U, that too little is bad. And then we know that too much is bad on the other side of the U. But sitting at that kind of an upside down U, sitting at the top of that U is that sweet spot that ranges usually from 7 to 9 hours. And so I tell people, look, I care more, and again, with these wearables, a lot more people learn about their sleep. I care much more about the quality of your sleep and getting back to duration. So learn about your habits. We tell people to try to go to sleep and wake up at the same time every day, because even on a weekend, when I was a teenager, I used to think I could just sleep in and kind of bank my sleep. We know that doesn't work. So sleep deprivation is another huge mistake. And there's a lot we have for content to help people get to sleep. And there's a lot more out there if you are suffering from insomnia. Get help and learn your data.
Having a newborn baby has made me, reconnect with sleep in a very direct way. But also it makes me realize that, like, we have to go back with babies to the very basics of learning how to self-soothe, put yourself to sleep, having routines around sleep. And I'm just like, these are things that we've all forgotten
all
about.
forgotten, but
And we should
applies.
retrench ourselves in saying
Absolutely.
having that pre-sleep routine,
That's right.
your wake routine, like it's super important.
I'm glad you bring that up because in the era of screens, like I'm guilty. Again, I told you I'm not the model patient here, but we tell people to get rid of screens because
Oh
of the
yeah,
blue light an
1000%.
hour before. It is so hard. So it gets back to your point about routine and really giving yourself like the most kind of like tranquil environment. And I can imagine you and I are sitting in New York, not easy to kind of put the noise out,
Oh yeah.
but you need to have that routine and kind of the quiet. And it's just like a baby. The same applies to adults.
I just think about if I just apply half of what we're doing for our baby to my own sleep routine,
Wait,
I will be doing phenomenal. But anyways,
that's right.
let's keep going. What's number 3 here?
All right. So I'm very excited. You and I have talked about social isolation and loneliness. That's number 3.
Okay.
I'm excited to get into this because I think people might be shocked to learn that, and we'll dive more into some of the science, but being lonely can be almost equivalent to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. That
Wow.
blows my mind.
Wow.
But that's
crazy.
literally been proved in the data that when you take people who have been isolated, and you can actually be around a lot of people, Matt, physically, or even have kind of people that you are in a family with and still be lonely. So it's really about the feeling of you're really isolated and socially and emotionally kind of alone. And so that's something that I think not enough people have paid attention to. I've often called it like the extra vital sign. We've got our blood pressure, our heart rate, our temperature, respiratory rate. But just taking a moment and doing a screening question about people's loneliness can tell you a lot more about their health and how you can actually improve your health. And in doing that, I find it that even plugging into like the Peloton community can help with kind of that feeling like I'm not all alone. And I think that's why it's been so important to have like the instructors foster those connections. But that literally has been shown to save lives. It's incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
It also improves performance.
It does. So it goes back. It all comes back with Matt to performance.
Yeah,
But
it
I think
does.
that and so one tip I have is we all have smartphones. Go into your smartphone and look up a contact or somebody that you haven't texted or connected with in a while and just send them a text right now and tell them that you're thinking about them or that you miss them. And it'll be kind of amazing to see if everybody listening does that, just pulls out your phone, sends a text, somebody that you have in your contact list, so somebody arguably that you know, and you send them something that says, thinking of you and miss you. And it's just amazing to see like kind of what ripple effect that can create. And just that little action can create something that can try to fight, again, almost like smoking almost a pack of cigarettes a day. Imagine
I know.
if you can just turn around that behavior with a habit.
Jumping ahead.
Lack of purpose and meaning. And this will be a little bit, I like to think of this as, it doesn't mean that you have to have all your life goals and kind of everything planned out for you, but just having something that you're excited about. I like to tell people that sometimes we talk about all the things that are wrong and what's going on in our lives that we want to change. But I tell people, like, what's one goal? It doesn't need to be some earth-shattering goal. It could be get out the door every day for 5 minutes. Yeah. And that's just something I need to do. And I tell people, don't try to boil the ocean. Just find something that they are passionate about. It could also be 5 minutes phone free with my kid, but something that feels like if you get that done today, you really felt like you found something that gave you more purpose, more meaning, and you moved the bar a little. And it's hard, but I do think that truly, and here's again the science behind it, we know that people who have kind of identified goals, albeit small, medium, big, doesn't matter. People who identify goals, even sometimes write them down, that they are more likely not only to accomplish them, but they are more likely to feel the satisfaction from the accomplishment of the goals. So I have been we're carrying, for people who can't see us, I've got a pen and paper. I'll be a big fan of just, okay, today, try to go to bed at 9 p.m. or try to go to bed at 10 p.m. Write that down, type it on your phone in a note, whatever the equivalent is, and set that kind of for an intention. And that really does matter. Get on the bike. Even if you don't know how long you can stay on the bike, get on the bike. That can be an example of kind of a way to get meaning in your daily activities. And it builds out to what we call longevity.
That's awesome. That makes total sense. I mean, how often it feels so good to either check something off or
Yeah.
cross it off the list, even at that basic
Very
level.
satisfying.
I think I went off the deep end with my career. It's just like
Yes,
something meaning out now. It's like, so maybe, is it possible to have too much meaning in your life?
it's possible. It's never, which gets us to our last one.
Yeah, what's the last?
All or nothing thinking.
There we go. That's
I
me.
think that's too many of us live in the 0 to 100, like it's all or it's nothing. I've either done all of this and I've accomplished everything, or I'm a failure. And I think that, like everything in life, nothing is 0 or 100. Everything is constantly, even Matt, like by the hour, you can have moments in your day where you're like, I'm not getting anything done. I'm a failure. Getting out of that thinking, you and I have talked about mindset. I've mentioned like a great influence on not just myself, but a lot of professionals I know is Carol Dweck mindset. She's a psychologist at Stanford now, and I have like the privilege of knowing her and working with her. But talking about like this all or nothing thinking gives you what we call a fixed mindset, where you're not open to growth, you're not open to change, and you end up actually, so where does this go with health? We know that people who have that kind of all or nothing thinking or some sort of fixed mindset are more likely to be alone, to feel like they did not accomplish both personal relationships and professional relationships in their life, and they're actually not as happy like at over periods of their life. So Harvard done a happiness study for decades and decades, studied and followed people with a kind of all or nothing mindset were likely to die earlier, also likely to be unhappy at the time of their death. People that had kind of this growth mindset that got out of this all or nothing thinking were much more likely to live longer and be happier. And again, this whole podcast is about longevity. What does that mean? We just want to live longer and happier, however that looks for you and wherever that looks for you.
That's all. I think it was Emma Lovewell that says progress, not perfection.
That's right. That's right. And that's that all or nothing thinking. I suffer from it. You can, like I said, hour to hour, it can shift. But if you turn it around, and I've taught like myself to say like, when I first came to the bike and I would try to do your longer classes, I remember you're like, well, I'm doing a 90-minute class. And I remember thinking, I can't do that. And what I've learned to do is to say, I can't do that yet. So I've added the word yet.
There you go.
I still haven't done it, Matt.
What?
But I blame time. Not that I don't want to do it, but I used to say to you, like, I can't do that. I turned that into, I can't do that yet.
Yes.
And I look forward to the day when I come. Maybe that'll be a live class. Maybe not.
Well, I always
don't
start
know.
those classes off by saying one thing: just moving for 90 minutes is success today.
Totally.
And if you're then able to like level up to hit the zones we are at,
Great.
even better. But simply moving for 90 minutes is going to give you like the biggest portion
Well,
of
the 90-minute class, when you told me about doing that, and I was like, I can't do that. And I shifted my brain. It's like, I can't do that yet. So add the word yet
All right.
to anything that you think you can't do.
Expect a photo when you
Get
know,
back.
selfie.
Exactly. That's right. That's right.
All right.
Those are our 5, Matt.
Those are our top 5. There we
yes.
go. So let's bring it home then. How can people start implementing these longevity habits right now?
Right. I think we talked about breaking this down into like bite-sized chunks, and that could mean just listening to, we've talked about the Move for Life programming. You can use that as your way to start, but it just, to me, is keeping it simple. You can either just move in where you're at, whatever place you're at indoors, or even getting out the door so that you can start a habit. But it's what you said to me, it's consistency, and it's kind of having something on a regular basis that you can adapt. And we're going to get into so many other areas, nutrition, sleep, etc. But it doesn't need to be intimidating. Just do something.
Dr. Patel, thank you for being here today and for sharing just a little bit of your wealth of knowledge with us today about longevity.
It was great to be with you, Matt. This was fun. Thank you.
I look forward to our next time together. We're going to be talking about exercise in our next episode and how it impacts not only our lifespan, but also our health span. And we're also going to dive into the differences of the impact from different modalities like strength training versus cardio. And of course, this is all supported with peer review research. Thank you for joining us for this first episode of Move for Life. Remember, longevity isn't about perfection. It's about progress. So keep moving, stay connected, and remember, you're not just training for today, you're training to move for life. Thank you.